conducted by Erica Carter from the Wright State University Veterans Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at Wright State University in the New Media Incubator. It is 12:48 p.m. on July 13th, 2018. Hello.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm doing well, and yourself?
I'm very, very good. When and where were you born?
Originally born, raised in Detroit, Michigan, 1971. Lived there for most of my young life until I joined the Air Force in 1989.
Okay. Who are you? Who are your parents, and what did they do?
Well, my mother, Inez Braziel, worked in the dry cleaners, and my father, Lincoln Braziel, worked at local, big three auto industry. So, very blue collar family center.
Do you have siblings?
Yes, I have 2 brothers, 1 sister. My brother, Douglas, who's my oldest brother, was a member of the Army National Guard in Michigan. And then my sister, Ann, was she still is a Marine, but she retired or separated about 15, 20 years ago, I believe.
Okay. What were you doing before you entered the service?
I was a student, high school student. I went to a aerospace vocational school named after the Air Force General Benjamin Oliver Davis. So I was there at a VOTEC school learning how to repair aircraft, did airframe, power plant repair, learned a little bit about drafting, learned some stuff about computer science. I even took flight training there, ended up getting like 25 hours towards a private pilot license. So the Air Force, I was probably destined to join the Air Force because of that school. And it was a pretty unique setup for the Detroit public school system because a lot of great folks, friends that I've went to school with, they're doing great things, working for the airlines, working in the government, own businesses. And I think it's because of that vocational school that Detroit put together is the reason why I'm here today.
Okay. How did your parents feel about you joining the military?
Oh, they couldn't wait. Like I said, I come from a military family, and they understood the value of military discipline and what the military can offer, especially for a kid like myself, blue-collar family. Not having come from a lot of money, the military was a way for me to achieve education, discipline, and job skills to be effective in society. So they were really for me joining the military.
So it's safe to assume because of the vocational school, that is why you chose the branch, the Air Force?
Yes, because we had Air Force ROTC. It just started in 11th grade when I was a student there at Davis Aerospace. So Sergeant Clater, who was my junior ROTC instructor, kind of gave me all the ins and outs about the military. And he shared with me his experience going overseas, being stationed far away places, and just all the benefits of being an airman, being in charge of multi-million-dollar projects, leading people, going to school, building friendships. So that appealed to me.
So this just resonated within you from, really, really young. That is wonderful. Did you enlist or did you go on commission?
No, I enlisted, age 17. Matter of fact, it's an interesting story. The ROTC instructor had the recruiter come before they started the ROTC program. Recruiter came to the school and said, hey, I got this test called the ASVAB. You guys would be interested in taking it. And of course, to get out of certain classes, we went and took the ASVAB. I didn't know what it was about, but fast forward several years later, when I decided to join the Air Force, they said, hey, we have your ASVAB scores on record, and you did pretty well. And they said, this is pretty high. You scored pretty high in open electrical. And I say that's contribute to the education at Davis Aerospace. It helped me score high in certain areas because of the training and education of attending that particular vocational school. So because of Davis Aerospace, the environment, mentors like Sergeant Clater and others, I decided to enlist.
Enlisted, we show up at basic training. How'd that go?
Before, I come from a military family, so my cousin and immediate family member, my cousin Tim, was the first to join in 1988. So he kind of gave me all the ins and outs, wrote me letters, and when he went to technical school, he kind of explained to me what to expect. And then with getting information from my mentors, I had a pretty firm idea what to expect when I went down to basic training. But when you go down there and actually experience it, it's a different story. So I knew things were going to happen, but I didn't know the intensity. But I'm thankful for that because it took me out my comfort zone, forced me to realize what I have inside of me to accomplish certain tasks, and then to work together as a team. So in the end, I ended up having more confidence as a young man by joining the Air Force. I felt that I pretty much can do anything as long as you give me some type of direction and give me some type of resources. So it was a good experience towards the end.
Where was basic?
San Antonio, Texas.
And where was your job training?
Shepherd Air Force Base in Wichita Falls, Texas.
How long was basic?
Basic was, I believe, like 6 weeks. So one of the shorter basic trainings in all the services. But technical school was about 3 months, so I would say about 12 weeks in Wichita Falls, Texas. So I went to basic training in September of 1989, graduated basic training. A couple months later, they went down to Wichita Falls, Texas, up to Wichita Falls, Texas for my technical school at, to be a lineman.
Can you further explain what a lineman does?
Yeah, a lineman is pretty much a exterior outside electrician responsible for building power lines. We climb poles, we build power stations, we install transformers, we run conduit. So like when there's a hurricane, when you heard about Puerto Rico, no power, the linemen who have come from different areas of the United States are going down to Puerto Rico to rebuild that power line grid or to install poles and run conduit again.
That sounds dangerous. Did you have any reservations?
Yes. Well, first of all, although I took some flight training at Davis Aerospace, I was definitely afraid of heights. So with that being said, when I went into the Air Force Open Electrical, I thought, imagine I would be an electrician on the inside, installing outlets, changing lights or whatever. Little did I know they made me an exterior electrician, which is a whole different story. And that requires climbing poles and getting into a bucket truck or a cherry picker, climbing towers 30, 40 feet, changing out the lights on a airfield beacon, which is much higher, 100 feet. So I had a hard time. I struggled with that, especially in basic training because, once again, I was afraid of heights. But the training and the instructors taught me how to look and dig deep into inside myself and overcome that fear. Sometimes you still have the fear climbing. I'm pretty sure if I were to climb a pole right now, I'll become a little hesitant, but there's a mechanism that I self-trained myself because of the education and training down at Shepherd to deal with that fear and overcome it and then do the job, do the mission.
During basic and your tech training, is there anybody that stood out in your mind or heart or really helped you proceed?
I would say the training instructor down in basic training, San Antonio, and that would be Sergeant George, Tech Sergeant George. He was the lead training instructor. He was tough, but he was fair. And I can see that he had a real concern and a passion for what he was doing. Although he would correct you and do it in a stern manner, I think he did it with compassion and also with the understanding that his job is to make you better so that you can be a contributing member of the Air Force. So I think Sergeant George played a part in my initial indoctrination in the Air Force. And then down up in Wichita Falls, Texas, I think it's all the training instructors that have contributed to my understanding and my ability to operate as a lineman. I can't recall most of their names, but I know that in the first block of instruction for a lineman school is the basic one-on-one climbing a pole. And the hardest thing is for many people to take the first step. But I had a training instructor say, hey, Carlos, what you need to do is figure out your own internal beat and your own internal drum. And you use that rhythm to climb the pole. When you climb and concentrate on that beat, everything falls to the wayside because you're focusing on one task at hand. And I took that to heart, and I used that to climb the pole. And before you know it, after about 25, 30 beats, you're almost to the top of the pole, and you forget about everything else. So I'm very thankful for that tip right there.
First duty station, where was it?
First duty station was Clark Air Base, Republic of the Philippines.
That's a big step for a young man.
Yes, it is. Especially coming from Detroit and going to a foreign country in an area like Clark Air Base. It was an eye-opener for me because, like I said, I didn't come from a lot of money, but I realized that there were people in the world that were in a worse condition than I was. And it taught me that you always be thankful for what you have because it can always be worse. And I gained an appreciation for my parents, what they provided, what they could, and then that kind of set the stage for where I am today. But going to Clark was a real eye-opener for me.
What happened at Clark?
It's just the amount of poverty, and the people are very generous, outgoing, but there's very poor parts of the Philippines that I had a chance to go visit that I didn't realize people live like that. But being an American and just going there and like I used to go to some of the barrios that play basketball. I mean, they were so generous. They would come out, share with us what they had. My friends and I would go play basketball, and we're playing basketball with some of the villagers. They're playing in flip-flops, and we have on pretty decent basketball shoes. But they were so happy because they were playing with Americans. And I was like, wow. I mean, people are people wherever you go. But because of their certain condition, that doesn't stop them from having joy. And I took that to heart as well.
What was your work day like in the Philippines?
Pretty typical. Get up at 7, go eat breakfast at the dining facility, get on the bus to go to the squadron, which is about 20 minutes away, and then start work at 8, get off at 1700, 5 o'clock, and do it all over again.
Okay. First duty station, second duty station?
The second duty station was Mountain Home Air Force Base, Idaho. And the funny story about that was my time at Clark was cut short because of various issues. The base was in the process of being turned over to the Philippine government. There were issues with strikes, attacks against Americans. And then we had an earthquake. And then the last major event was Mount Pinatubo that actually erupted and forced a lot of us to evacuate earlier than expected. So as a result of that and the curtailments of the assignments, I was sent to Mountain Home Air Force Base, Idaho, which is definitely outside of my scope, of my understanding and my culture. Pretty much to my chagrin, I wasn't really ready or prepared to go there.
In what sense do you want?
Well, it was more of a rural environment, and I like either being overseas because of my time at Clark or wanted to be in the city. And I ended up going there because they kept just sending people to different locations, and it turned out to be a pretty good assignment.
Why?
One thing, I met my wife there, so that was my second base where I met my wife. And then another thing is it opened up my world view, at least my view about the United States. Once again, I'm from the city, pretty much in the urban environment, but when I got to Mountain Home, I was exposed to a lot of different people, a lot of different activities like camping, fishing, hunting. I never saw myself doing that. And some good friends who are not the same background. You know, a lot of the folks there on the base and off base, they're from Idaho, they're from the South, a different culture, different skin color, different ethnic background. But just being able to work together in a somewhat of a, I guess, an isolated environment forced us to pretty much socialize together. And when you socialize with someone from another background, you understand things and you learn a little bit about them and they learn a little bit about you. So it helps with your worldview and it opens up your eyes. And I think it makes you a better leader and a better citizen because although you may have some differences, you still have a common goal and you can still overcome your differences to be friends and work together and so forth. So that was a good assignment for me.
How long was that assignment?
That was only a year, but it was a year of good fellowship. Like I said, I met my wife, good church community, and just doing things that I would never imagine I would do. And it's the Air Force. The Air Force will put you in locations where at first you will resist, but you find a way to, I guess, insert yourself into the community and be a part of it.
Are you in contact with any of those people still?
Yes. Matter of fact, the Chaplain Birnbaum, who married my wife and I, is here in Dayton, Ohio. So she married us almost 28 years ago.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. And then we have some friends from our time in Mountain Home that we keep in touch with.
Okay. Second duty station, what happens next?
So, because I was hesitant to really spend time in Idaho because I didn't think I would enjoy it, the first official duty day, I went to the military personnel flight and put in for overseas short tour anywhere to get me out of Mountain Home. And I did that like the first day. So fast forward like 9 months later, I've forgotten about it. And then I get notice that, hey, I got orders. And I said, orders? And I said, oh yes, I forgot. I put in for overseas short tour or whatever, and end up getting assigned to Misawa Air Base, Japan. So I leave the Philippines, go to Idaho for 1 year, and then I end up getting an assignment to the Far East again, and that's Japan.
Were you able to take your wife?
Yes. Yes, and my wife accompanied me roughly 6 months later.
You're in Japan. This is another wow experience, am I right?
Right.
What happened?
Initially I went there first. I just fell in love with Japan, the whole culture. It's a family-oriented society. It's a society that's focused on wa, or a sense of unity. So you do things not to embarrass your family, embarrass your organization, embarrass your country. So they're very aware of that. And everything you do should have purpose and you should do it honorably. And I really learned a lot about that, is always give your best, serve with honor, help out your fellow people in the community, and just the culture. Being able to go to the different temples and learning some of the language. And the electrical shop I worked at Misawa was half Japanese, half American. So it was to the point where we had our own little language because it was a mixture of Japanese and English. And that's the way we understood each other. And you really pick up and learn Japanese, and at the same time they learn English. And we got to the point that at lunchtime we, you know, adhere to the Japanese custom of eating the bento, and then normally they would take a nap, but the Americans like to play cards, so we got them to kind of give up their nap time and to play cards with us. So it was a mixture of cultures there, and barbecues and family events, Christmas time. We really, I say we became a family over there.
It sounds like so far the military is changing your core values for the better.
Right.
And you're making all kinds of friends and associates. That is wonderful.
Right.
How long were you in Japan?
5 years. So we kept extending because we love the environment, love the people there, and we really enjoyed ourselves.
Now, your first duty station, there was a eruption, right?
Yes.
Volcano. That's the word I was looking for. The volcano erupted. Did anything spectacular happen in Japan?
We had an earthquake, but it wasn't as severe as the time in Misawa. But for the most part, Japan was low-key in regards to any issues there in country. The only time that was somewhat a struggle for my wife and I is when we both got deployed 1 year, I forget which year, but we had a total of like 1 month together. So
she was in the military too?
yes, she was that's where I met her. She was stationed in Mountain Home, Idaho.
And you guys got married, and okay, so that's why it took her 6 months to come. I just thought she'd take a long time to come.
No.
The military had to send her.
And actually, to expand on that, she wasn't a U.S. citizen yet, so she was from Trinidad, Tobago. She was in the States on the green card. She joined the military, and she had to get her citizenship before the Air Force would send her overseas. So that's why it took 6 months for her to come meet me in Misawa, Japan.
Dual military family.
Mm-hmm.
How did that affect your life?
Like I said, 1 year we spent a total of roughly about 30 days together because of deployment requirements. I got deployed to Kuwait, she got deployed to Australia, I get deployed to Korea, she get deployed somewhere else. So, and then we had training, school requirements, and so that year was pretty tough for us because we didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time together. But both being in the military, we knew this was the deal we signed up for, and we kept in touch with letters and phone calls when possible, and things like that. But
what year do you leave Japan?
we left Japan in '97.
Where'd you go after that?
So from Misawa, Japan, I went to Shepherd Air Force Base, Texas, where I went to tech school to go back to be an instructor. So while during my time in Japan, I ended up getting into somewhat the teaching field. So I was a CPR instructor in our unit. I attended the EMT, Emergency Management Technician training course, and I started getting more involved with that, learning about that. Also was a tutor in a local Japanese community, teaching written in English and also mathematics. So I really acquired a taste and desire to teach. And because I ended up getting a couple of undergrad degrees, associate's degrees through the Community College of the Air Force and also University of Maryland, where I got back to my assignments, department back in Air Force Personnel Center, that, hey, your assignment is due. I mean, you're due for a new assignment. Also, you got that degree. You may want to volunteer for a teaching assignment. So.
What degree and what degree?
Yes, so got a associate's in electrical and mechanical technology, and also a associate's from the University of Maryland in computer science.
It could not have been easy to be married going to school in the military, how did that affect you?
Yes, it was tough because you had your job, you had deployments, and then you had the stressors of everyday life with your family. But my wife and I, our purpose, one of our goals with joining the military was to get an education. And during the time in Misawa, they had tuition assistance, which paid 75% of your tuition, but it didn't cover the cost for books. But still, that was enough money to get started and start taking courses. So with the guidance and direction from like my supervisor and my mentor, pretty much told me, you need to start taking college courses. So I did, and I started taking a couple courses here and there, and then I started to see the goal line. I said, well, I can knock out my associates in this amount of time, and then that will help me towards my bachelor's. So I started following a plan, and I would go to the education center and take CLEP tests, in which they give you college credit for information you already know, and that helped with my goal towards achieving an associate's degree and just taking courses, and then also experience that they give you credit for at the colleges for your time in the military and some of the training courses you attend.
Thank you. So we're an instructor back in Texas. How long have you been in at this point?
I say over 7.5 years, 8 years.
Okay. How long was your contract for?
Yeah, so I re-enlisted once in Japan. And then I was at the point on my third enlistment at Shepherd. And that's when the opportunity to go commission came up.
Do tell.
Yeah, so I was at that critical juncture where my contract, 8-year contract, or my enlistment was just about to expire. So I was making plans to pretty much separate. I was about 2-3 credits shy of my bachelor's, and I was looking at a job in the civilian sector working for an electrical manufacturing company, maybe selling equipment or doing program management. But I did some interviews, and they seemed to like, what I had to offer. And I was getting ready to make that transition until a friend of mine, who was also an instructor, I'll never forget, Kareem Owens, said, hey, we should put in our packages to get commission. And at the time, the selection rate was pretty low. And I didn't see any benefit with doing all that work and the possibility of not being selected. But he did convince me. He said, hey, if you don't put in your package, Carlos, and don't try, you'll forever go through life thinking that, man, I missed out on the opportunity. So I said, yeah, you're right. So we actually worked together and help each other with the packages and other things to get prepared for being considered for commission in the OTS program, Officer Training School. So we put in our packages, forgot about it. I was making transitions to leave the military, started buying civilian clothes, suits, and everything like that. And then one day we were in a classroom, and our commander came down. I got word that the commander's coming to the classroom, and I said, oh, something's going on. So of course I have the class straighten up, and she comes down and says, congratulations, you got selected for Officer Training School. And I was like, excuse me, ma'am? She said, you got selected. I said, that's impossible. The selection is not until September. She said, well, they did an early board. You got selected. You need to go to the education office to get your class date. And I was still in shock. I said, that's not possible, ma'am. They told me September. She said, here's the letter. You got selected. So I was pretty much fighting it because I couldn't believe it. So I hightailed it down. Kareem came to my classroom. He said, you hear the news? I said, yeah. So we go over to the education office. Sure enough, we got selected early. So I'm thankful for Kareem for motivating me and pretty much forcing me into doing that. And likewise, so we've been friends ever since. And yeah, that was a great experience. So he got selected, and he got an earlier class. So he went in March. He went ahead of me, and then I went later in May. So similar to basic training, he writes me letters to kind of give me a heads up on what to expect. I knew I had an idea what to expect until you get down there and you don't have a true appreciation for the intensity of the whole program. So it was a lot tougher than the basic training program because as a enlisted member, former enlisted member, they are a lot tougher on you because they understand and know you know better. So their expectations of you is much higher. And because of that, I think that definitely increased my level of confidence and made me a better officer when I actually went out into the field.
How long is OTC?
OTS, Officer Training School, roughly 90 days when I went there in 1999. So I enlisted in 1989. I went to a basic training, and then 10 years later, I went to another basic training course, Officer Training School.
I'm curious, was your wife still enlisted?
Yes, so she was still in, but based on how things were going to be with me being an officer, she decided to switch from active duty to go into the reserves. And she switched from active duty to reserves and started working in her field as a civilian, which is paralegal, being a paralegal. So.
Okay. We're done with officer training school. What happens next?
So from Maxwell Air Force Base, Alabama, where the officer training school is located, I get sent to my first duty station, which is Randolph Air Force Base, Texas. And my career field is transportation. I become a transportation officer because at the time I had a computer science occupational education undergrad degree. So in essence, I didn't qualify to go back into my original career field, which is civil engineering, which I worked as a lineman electrician. But I go into Randolph working as a transportation officer. I was in charge of the readiness flight for mobilization and anything that deals with executing and moving troops and materials in support of emergency management and stuff like that. And life is good, you know. Officer, achieved one of my life's goals. And then an opportunity came up in which some of the fellow civil engineering officers asked me if I would help them with a self-help project at the Officers Club. And that is because they knew I was an electrician. They were refurbishing the Auger Inn, which is a little entertainment area bar down in the Officers Club. They didn't have a budget to really hire an electrician, but they figured they can get me for free. So I said, yeah, no problem. It's part of the Company Grade Officer Association. It's a project. And I volunteer my time to do the electrical for that particular project. And initially, it was a lot of help and support, but I noticed over the next few weeks, the volunteers start to reduce and wane off, and I was pretty much left holding the bag, doing it by myself. So because I gave my word and I didn't want that to fail, I would just go after work every day. I spoke to my wife. She said, you gave your word, so you have to do your part at least. So I would go there after work a couple hours to make sure the project gets done and completed on time. So I do it, do my part. People are happy. They're very thankful. Then the project lead, I forgot his name, he was a major, he was a pilot. He's like, Carlos, without your support and help, we would not have completed this project. What do you want? Do you want to become a pilot? Do you want an assignment or whatever? I said, no, not really. I said, if anything, I prefer to go back into my original career field, civil engineering, but because I don't have that degree yet, I know it's impossible. And he said, hold on, let me talk to Colonel Eulberg, who was the Mission Support Group commander. So some time passed, a couple weeks, and Colonel Eulberg calls me over to his office and said, hey, I'd like to talk to you about your career. So I go over there and he said, we're going to pull you back into CE, civil engineering, but you're going to have to go to school and get your engineering degree. And I said, okay, sir, how would that work? He said, well, we're going to send you to the Air Force Institute of Technology at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio, to get a master's in engineering management. But you have to take a few courses, here in San Antonio, and then we need to put you into the CE squadron so that you can get the hands-on training and understanding. And by the way, you move next week. And I was like, okay. So it just shocked me because I had no idea that things like that can happen. So that taught me a lesson. Always do your part, be grateful, do it to the best of your ability, and things will happen. So a week later, I went to the Civil Engineering Squadron, which was across the base, worked in the Environmental Management Office for about a year, and then they moved me over to maintenance engineering, where I was the deputy base in civil maintenance engineer responsible for repair, maintenance, grounds and stuff for the base. And that's where I really learned how to manage contracts, the energy program, the utilities program, and so forth. And I did that for another year until I actually came here to Wright-Pat Air Force Base to start the AFIT program in engineering management.
It's about 2004, 5?
That's about 2002.
Oh.
So from 1999, I go to Randolph. I'm there, and then 2002, we come here to Ohio to start the master's program.
How was AFIT?
AFIT was great. It was an eye-opener because as enlisted, I've done all my education in night school. So as you know from your experiences, during your lunch break, you would do your work and try to knock out your homework. Then you go back to work, and then when you get home, you do some more homework. But here, going to AFIT, I had the opportunity just to focus solely on school, and that was it. And it was weird because I had really no other obligations except for the family and for school. But at the same time, it was very challenging because I was a little behind on some of the engineering courses, so I had to study twice as hard to get up to a acceptable level for the chemistry, the math, as well as some of the other engineering courses. But hard work pays off. I stayed at it, ended up graduating, ended up winning an award for thesis that contribute the most to the career field of civil engineering, and wrote my thesis, graduated, and was done with that. Ended up having an engineering degree.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
We're still at Wright-Pat at this point?
Yes.
And then you're stationed there. So we're done with AFIT, and now you're stationed at Wright-Pat?
Yes, so I ended up taking a job working at Headquarters Air Force Materiel Command. So this is 2004, so I go over to the headquarters to work as a program manager, working base infrastructure. A couple months later, I go to Qatar Air Base, Al-Udeid Air Base, Qatar.
How long was
Qatar.
this deployment?
The deployment was for about, I say over 4 months.
Okay.
Yes.
So you're still stationed at Wright-Pat?
I'm still stationed at Wright-Pat, but
They need you in Qatar. You go to Qatar.
yeah, Qatar. So I go there for 4 months, work at the Combined Air Operations Center as a program manager and also a facility manager. And that experience was pretty good. It was during the Second Gulf War. I was responsible for sending crews and folks to different locations to evaluate runways for the potential offensive in Fallujah and other places. So I sent a team over to evaluate the runways, and they report back to me, and we report back to the KOC. So that was a good experience, being a contributing factor for the war, our career field, seeing how CE contributes to that, and how we made it happen to keep people off the roads, but they can just land at these bases that we verified and validated the runways. I think we saved a lot of lives that way. So after my deployment, I come back here and I work in the emergency management shop. So we're responsible for emergency management plans, and that includes not only chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear type attacks, preparing the base for that, but we also had explosive ordnance disposal underneath our section, fire department, and training for emergency management. So we're responsible for all the Air Force material command bases, making sure that we provide the policy and guidance to these bases. So around that time, we had Katrina down in New Orleans that happened, and I was part of the crisis action team to come up with a plan for evacuating and relocating some of our Americans that were suffering down in New Orleans to other locations using mil-air. So we had an opportunity to write a new plan to explain to the Air Force how we plan to do that. So it was a good experience learning how to work with the different organizations, local and federal organizations, to help our evacuees get to safe ground. So I was pretty much at headquarters Air Force Material Command for roughly about, I would say, close to 4 years. And then my next assignment, I was set up to go to Michigan State to be our ROTC instructor. But for some reason, the spot was canceled due to budget cuts. So my SES, Mr. Tim Bridges, and some other folks recommend that I look into taking a job in Cairo, Egypt as a security cooperation officer. And I was like, sir, what is that? Well, you'll learn about this when you go to the Defense Institute of Security Assistance Management to learn about it. I said, sir, what is that? So this is a completely whole new area for me and a lot of folks in the Air Force or the military. And DICEM, or the Defense, at the time it was called Defense Institute of Security Assistance Management, was responsible for teaching military and civilians how to engage and cooperate with foreign militaries across the globe. So that position is coded as a security cooperation officer, where military members would go to the embassies and work with foreign partners and help them buy equipment and services to strengthen their military. And at the same time, it helped build that relationship between the United States and the host nation military. So in 2007, we get reassigned to the embassy in Cairo, Egypt, and I start doing this job with building relationships with the Egyptian Air Force and military. And it was another eye-opener for me, because I was like, relationship building. But I slowly understood and realized the whole overall scheme, and that is to build these relationships so that we can have partners across the world, so that they can help us with our foreign strategy. And because I would go over and meet with my counterparts and drink tea and go TDY with them, that was a benefit to the United States, because eventually these same captains and majors will become generals and even presidents of the country, and they will have a lot of influence, which is good for foreign policy.
Okay. Your wife went with you?
Yes.
Do you have any children at this point?
Yes. So at the time, our son, when we first went to Egypt, he was, I think, 16 months, and when we got assigned to Egypt.
What happened after Egypt?
Well, we spent over 4 years in Egypt. So I actually retired in country. My wife worked at the embassy. She worked for the Office of Military Cooperation, so did I, but she was the admin assistant to the senior defense official. So she worked directly for the two-star general. And I worked underneath the general staff, working Air Force civil engineer programs. So my wife and I and my son, we enjoyed Egypt so much that the opportunity came that I can retire and take a contractor job there, and my wife continued to work at the embassy. So we did. So around 2010, I actually retired from active duty and worked as a defense contractor doing business development. And she continued to work at the embassy. And my son really enjoyed the location. He went to school there, learning the culture. And once again, the theme is opening, expanding your worldview, creating a global mindset. So that was one of the reasons why we enjoyed staying there. But like anything else, things have a tendency to end and expire. In 2011, that's when we had the Arab Spring, and there was some civil unrest in Egypt, and we got evacuated in February 2011.
Everyone?
Yeah, mostly everyone, except for mission critical members of the embassy. So as we got evacuated and we went to our safe haven, we were asked, where do you want to go? And because we were in Ohio before, and we had a house here, we said we'd prefer to go back to Dayton, Ohio, near Wright Pat, because we have friends and family there, to wait out and to eventually return back to Cairo. But we got back here in February 2011, and the evacuation continued. The order to not to return kept going, and eventually we hit the six month mark, I guess, and we decided just to stay here. So I resigned from the company I worked for. She resigned from the embassy, and we decided to establish roots here because we stayed in the hotel for about 6 months.
Wow. With a young child.
Yes, it was very traumatic for him because since a year and a half, all he's known was Egypt. And then coming back into the U.S. culture, that abruptly, it was a shocker for him. But over time, kids are resilient. He overcame that, and he's fully ingrained back in the American culture.
Okay. Your readjustment to civilian life personally, how'd that go?
It was a little shaky because when you're in the military, you have a support system. You have people who have common culture, or you have people that have been through somewhat similar experience with you, and they understand, when you talk about certain things and when you explain your standards, they have the same standards. But in the civilian field, it's not the same. It was quite different for me, and also I felt somewhat isolated sometimes because I worked for a defense contractor, but I was one of 2 Americans in a small office, and you don't have that support network that you would have at the embassy or back at the base. So that was my exposure to the civilian sector. But when I got back here and took another job as a contractor, we had more retirees who had similar experiences, and so that tended to help with my transition a lot more. And then I took a job later that year, 2011, working as an instructor at the Defense Institute of Security Assistance Management, now known as DISC, where I went to school to become a security cooperation officer roughly about 5 years ago. So because of my experience working at the embassy, working as a contractor, getting evacuated, and then at the time I earned a doctorate degree in education, it was just the right time for me, and it was a good opportunity for me to get into a job like that because I love teaching. I love explaining how to build relationships, cross-cultural awareness, and then now I'm all about learning more about the U.S. foreign policy and how that impacts us in other countries. So it was a win-win for me, that job.
Are you done with that job?
Yeah, I was there for about 4 years, and then in 2015, I went to Germany to work for the Army at Stuttgart, Germany, working at U.S. AFRICOM Command. And because of my experience in Africa, Cairo, Egypt, working as a security cooperation officer, cross-cultural awareness, foreign military sales, I got picked up to be the Sahel Maghreb counterterrorism program manager. So I was responsible for helping to provide defense services, trainings, and other capability to our foreign partners in the Sahel Maghreb region of Africa, making sure that they have the equipment to counter terrorism in that region.
How long were you there?
I was there over 18 months. So part of that job, I would go down to the African continent from time to time, meet with our partners, learn more about how the equipment and training we provided them, how effective that is, and then see some of their exercises to evaluate it. Then I would go and meet with other folks in the defense industry to understand what new equipment is out there. And then I would recommend that equipment to our foreign partners in training and do that all over again. So it was a good assignment.
Did your wife go?
Yeah, she went with me to Germany, as well as my son. And once again, we enjoyed the German life, different culture. So my wife and I, myself, Philippines, Japan, Egypt, and then Germany. So we pretty much hit all the areas except for Latin America. But
are you interested in Latin America?
Yeah, I would like to go there one day and just be exposed to the environment, learn about it, learn about the culture.
So 18 months, you finished that tour. Are you still working for the same company?
Yeah, no, it was the U.S. Army. So while I was over there, because of my background in foreign military sales, security cooperation, experience working with foreign partners, and because I got that that engineering management degree and that experience, Air Force Security Assistance and Cooperation Directorate here that does the implementation of Air Force foreign military sales cases for the U.S. government. They had a new position called Business Development for Civil Engineering. So I was asked, hey, would I be interested in a position like that? And they knew my background and my experience and my desire to travel and learn about people and business development ability. And I said, yeah. And they said, well, we're going to announce the job. Why don't you apply for it? So I did on a whim, and it was a promotion. It was a GS 1415 equivalent, and I applied for it. I thought I did okay on the interview. A couple weeks later, they offered me the job. And I was intending to be in Germany for like at least 3 years, but it was an opportunity, promotion. I was going to be in charge of a $1 billion program, be in charge of people, pretty much doing the thing I was doing when I was in the military. And I spoke to my wife about it, and he said, yeah, we love Germany, but we can't stand in the way of your progress. So I accepted the job, and we came back here in 2016, and I started working as the chief of new business, new requirements for foreign military sales, international construction.
We've talked a whole lot about your extensive career. Amazing, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do now in your free time?
We're heavily involved in the church. We go to Beaver Creek Christian Life Center here in Beaver Creek, Ohio, next to the base. So I play music. I play guitar, play bass, drums sometimes. So I play in the worship band. We volunteer for the church with Rice for Swaziland. I cycle a lot. I work out. We travel. I'm involved with Blacks in Government, Dayton chapter. So we do a lot of things that help the community. And one of my things, as I learned being in the military, was that you have to give back. So reason why we decided to come back to the States is so that we can really get involved in the community and contribute. So anything that we can do, or if I can do, to help the next person that's been through my path or in the process of taking the same steps that I've taken, I will do that and be a mentor, be a servant leader if I can.
Okay. That leads right into my next question. What message would you like to leave for future generations who will hear or see this interview?
I would say is do things to help develop yourself. Always set goals for yourself so that you can be a better person and be a contributing citizen for this country. What I've learned in my short time on the earth is it's not always about me. It's about what I can do to make my family and others better around me. So I learned to step outside myself and figure out how my actions would help aid and impact and make this place better. And right now, with the current environment, we need more people who are willing to give of themselves to help improve this nation. And I would say consider that as you start your career. What can you do to help contribute to this country? What can you do to help contribute to the human race? I mean, it's good to, and I thought, and I had it, you know, I was working as a contractor, making a lot of money, doing well, flying business class, but inside I felt empty because I didn't see how I was actually contributing. I didn't have the same amount of satisfaction that I do right now. So be honest, be truthful to yourself, but consider how you can contribute to this nation.
Thank you. Is there anything you feel like you haven't said or we left out of this interview?
No, I mean, I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of my life, and hopefully it will motivate someone or give others something to consider. I say that when I see videos like this, I definitely try to tune in on some of the things that can help me, you know, with my own development as a person, a man of God, and a citizen of this nation.
Thank you so much for your time during this interview. This concludes our interview at Wright State University with Veterans Voices Project.